Blue Beetle, Volume 7, 2006, Issues 1-6, Comic Club, for August 2023. Content and trigger warnings. One of the characters is a victim of domestic abuse. It's never depicted in comic panel, but is referenced. There's also a coffee order in issue 4 that feels homophobic, or at least screams toxic masculinity with a dash of gay stereotypes mixed in a way you only got in the 2000s. Keith Giffen and John Rogers are the co-writers for the first 10 issues of the 2006 Blue Beetle series. Giffen, the comic industry pro, and Rogers a screenwriter with a small amount of prior comic experience. Rogers would stay on the book for a total of 25 issues, with the full series lasting 36 issues, finishing in 2009. Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle would next get a solo series in 2011's DC 52 Universe reboot, and another series in 2016's DC Rebirth era. Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle had a 6-issue miniseries called Graduation Day that released in 2023, and September saw the start of a new ongoing Blue Beetle series as part of the Dawn of DC initiative designed to onboard new readers into DC Comics that lasted for approximately 12 issues. Keith Giffen was a comic industry legend. They were the artist co-creator of Marvel's Rocket Raccoon in 1976, created in his first ever gig in the comic industry, and the penciler co-creator of Lobo in 1983. Keith wanted to make comics from the age of 8, inspired by the works of Jack Kirby and G. Coolan, among others. In his early 20s, he narrowly avoided getting drafted into the Vietnam War more than 4 times because his fast metabolism kept him below the 115-pound or 52-kilogram weight minimum requirement, and worked for a pharmaceutical waste disposal company for 4 years. He created an art portfolio, which he took into Marvel offices. Unbeknownst to Giffen, John Romita Sr., the art director at the time, was scrambling because Ed Hannigan, who was the artist on a backup strip called The Sword and the Star, a black and white story in the comic series Marvel Preview, had walked off, and they needed somebody yesterday to take over. Bill Mantlo, the writer of the strip, had seen the portfolio Giffen had sent in and liked it. After drawing the backup strips, he did a bunch of drudge work at Marvel for their art department, but he kept coming up with interesting characters like Jack of Hearts. Being young, Giffen didn't have the work ethic required to work in comics, missing deadlines, making excuses, and getting fired from both Marvel and DC by the late 70s. Returning to his home, he did odd jobs outside of the comic industry to make a living. Several months into dating his now wife, she excitedly discovered that Giffen could draw, and he filled her in on how he burned his bridges with the big 2 comic companies. One day we met up with her, Anna. She says, "Oh, tomorrow you have an appointment with a new talent guy at DC whom Giffen had previously worked with." Giffen was surprised, but figured, what the hell, what's the worst that can happen? The talent guy at DC said, "We're giving you a slow assignment, and if you don't bleep it up, you'll get more work." Giffen turned in what he didn't consider the best work, but it was on time for some horror anthologies, and in 1982 eventually got given a backup feature in The Flash comics, featuring Dr. Fate, and backup features in the Legion of Superheroes books. He got them in on time, and from there his comic career was revived, eventually being given the entirety of the Legion book to illustrate and later write from 1982 through 1998, revisiting the series for a short stint in 2013. After successfully experimenting with his unorthodox brand of humor in the 1985 Legion of Superheroes special, Giffen began employing this style in many of his works. He co-created the humorous Justice League International series in 1987 with J.M. DeMatteis and Kevin Maguire. The success of that series led to a spin-off in 1989 titled Justice League Europe, also co-written with DeMatteis and later with Gerard Jones, and featuring art by Bart Sears. The Giffen-DeMatteis team worked on Justice League for 5 years until 1992. They reunited to work together multiple times, including on the 2016 Scooby Apocalypse series. Giffen's other work has included the 2009 Doom Patrol series for DC and for Marvel, the 2007 Annihilation Conquest Star-Lord comics, the 2005 Drax the Destroyer miniseries, and from 1976 to 1977 worked on The Defenders. He also wrote 2 episodes of Ed, Edd, and Eddy, a Cartoon Network animated series. As an anecdotal aside, Keith Giffen, when asked, "Will I get to see the Blue Beetle movie?" responded, "I don't care. I'll go see it if it's around, but it won't break my heart if I miss it. I did Blue Beetle. I kind of know how it ends. I had to be dragged to go see the latest Guardians movie by my daughter." Keith Giffen was a bit of a gamer. In an April 2023 episode of his podcast, Keith Giffen, I'm Not Dead Yet, the man in his 70s, while sitting in a gamer chair, was amusingly annoyed that he'd finished downloading Dead Island 2 and had to do the podcast before playing the game. Keith Giffen passed away on October 9th, 2023. John Rogers is primarily known as a screenwriter of questionable movies, like the first draft script for the first Michael Bay Transformers movies, did an early screenplay for the 2004 Halle Berry Catwoman movie, and some enjoyable TV, including Leverage, which he apparently left the Blue Beetle comic to focus on, The Librarians, the US show, centered around Noah Kyle, and the animated series, The Jackie Chan Adventures. John Rogers wanted to be a mystery writer and wanted to write sparkling banter and dialogue, so became a stand-up comedian to get a better sense of how jokes worked while completing a degree to become a physicist. Figuring out he was better at stand-up than as a physicist, he became a full-time stand-up, did a bunch of specials, and had a failed sitcom. He saw how the writers from the failed sitcom went on to do other work and said, "The job where you fail and get to keep working, I want that," so circled back into writing as a TV comic and comic writer. One of the takeaway lessons John Rogers learned from Keith Giffen during their Blue Beetle run, which he applied to his TV run, was not continuity, but coherence. You don't have to make sure you've seen every single episode, but when you do tune in, you want to understand what's going on. Jaime Reyes was not the first Blue Beetle, nor was Blue Beetle originally a DC character. Is also sometimes called Jaime Reyes. The original Blue Beetle was created by Charles Wachowski and was owned by Fox Comics, no relation to the Fox Network or Fox News, and later acquired by Charlton Comics. The first Blue Beetle was Dan Garrett, who initially gained superpowers from a special vitamin, which was later changed to gaining powers from a sacred scarab, probably to avoid pro-drug connotations. The original Blue Beetle was featured in not only his own comic, but also a weekly radio serial. After Dan Garrett was killed off, the second Blue Beetle, a young inventor named Ted Kord, took up the mantle of his mentor and friend. Ted Kord was created by Steve Ditko of Amazing Spider-Man fame. When Garrett died and passed on the responsibility of the alter ego to Ted, he was not able to pass on the mystical Blue Beetle scarab, a convenient means for Ditko to explain his preference for a power-free character. Ted Kord instead operated with a bunch of tech gadgets and some hand-to-hand combat. Charlton Comics had an Action Heroes line in 1966 featuring Blue Beetle, Peacemaker, Judo Master, and Captain Atom. The Blue Beetles comic of the 60s and 70s at one point had a secondary story in the back pages featuring The Question, a faceless crime-busting detective. By the 80s, Charlton Comics was struggling, and their superhero comics were underselling compared to other genres. The characters in the former Action Heroes lineup sold to DC in 1983 at the request of the managing editor, Dick Giordano, 2 years prior to Charlton Comics ceasing publication altogether, and many of the superheroes have since been integrated into the DC universe. One exception is Peter Cannon. Thunderbolt, pictured on the poster. DC only bought Charlton Comics' license to have the ability to publish Peter Cannon comics commissioned from the original creator, unlike the others who they purchased outright. Once the license expired, DC negotiated an extension to the license, but eventually DC let the license lapse. As of 2012, DC has no rights to publish Peter Cannon, and the estate of the creator has licensed the Peter Cannon character to other publishers. Peter Cannon is an important FYI, just an importantly interesting side note and potential cautionary tale, showing the potential worst-case dangers of creators owning their own character rights. Peter Cannon has faded into obscurity, while most of the other heroes in the main lineup are still major characters today, and even Judo Master had a supporting role in the Peacemaker TV series. Ted Kord, the second Blue Beetle, featured prominently in Giffen's Justice League comics. Kord was shot in the head by his former Justice League ally, Maxwell Lord, in 2005's Countdown to Infinite Crisis. Kord would remain dead, give or take a brief stint as a zombie, until the mid-2010s, brought back to life out of a couple universe reboots. The Ted Kord version of Blue Beetle has been adapted to various media, including Smallville, in the cartoon Batman, the Brave and the Bold, voiced by Will Wheaton, and had small roles in DC Superhero Girls, Teen Titans Go, and Young Justice. Ted Kord is mostly remembered for his close friendship with Booster Gold, and in the Teen Titans Go cartoon, with confirmation from one of the lead storyboard artists, has been depicted as lovers in that animated universe, a pairing that's generated considerable amounts of online fan art. Jaime Reyes, or Jaime Reyes, is a Mexican-American superhero created by Keith Giffen, John Rogers, and Cully Hammer. The character made his first appearance in Infinite Crisis issue 3 in February 2006, becoming Blue Beetle in Infinite Crisis issue 5. His scarab gives him enhanced sight, armor, flight with wings, and extendable armor weapons, including plasma cannons, bladed weapons, etc. Jaime's version of Blue Beetle has appeared in a range of media. They appeared in a number of DC animated movie universe movies, voiced again by Jake T. Austin from Wizards of Waverly Place, who reprised the role for the animated shorts series Justice League Action. Jaime appeared as Batman's main protege sidekick in the animated series Batman the Brave and the Bold, voiced by Will Friedle, the voice of Ron Stoppable and Kim Possible. The character appeared in the Smallville episode Booster, was voiced by Eric Lopez in the animated series Young Justice, is voiced by D. Bradley Baker in Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham, is a playable character in Injustice 2, makes background appearances in DC Superhero Girls, appears in DC Universe Online Legends, and is a summonable character in Scribblenauts Unmasked, a DC Comics adventure. Plot summary of the Blue Beetle, Volume 7, 2006, issues 1-6. Issue 1. The title, Blue Monday, is a reference to the song of the same name by the 80s band New Order. The Infinite Crisis, referred to on the cover. Front cover was a 2005 to 2006 comic book storyline published by DC Comics, a 7-issue comic book limited series written by Jeff Johns and illustrated by artists like Phil Jimenez and George Perez, and a number of tie-in books. Crisis events at DC are normally universe-altering events that either condense, tweak, or expand on the historical context of the DC universe. From an editorial perspective, they're an in-universe way of explaining events that usually see either the destruction or creation of multiverses, sometimes both happening simultaneously, happen. There can also be ways for characters from different areas of DC to interact. This issue intercuts between 2 points in time. In the first, future point in time, Blue Beetle crash lands and has a fight with Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner is one of the multiple human Green Lanterns that are part of the Green Lantern Corps, an intergalactic space police force comprised of many alien species living in harmony, maintaining peace in 3,600 sectors of space. Simplified, their powers are to create green energy constructs coming from green rings, recharged by Green Lanterns, with the strength of their willpower being the only cap on how powerful they are. Weaknesses of the rings have at various times in comics included wood and the color yellow. Guy Gardner was created by John Broome and Gil Kane in Green Lantern Volume 2, Issue 59 in 1968, but was a dull, lifeless character, and the character was changed significantly in the 1980s by Steve Englehart and Joe Station, who turned him into an arrogant, cocky, overly patriotic parody of the ultra-macho, red-blooded American male. Nathan Fillion is set to portray Guy Gardner in the Superman Legacy movie, currently scheduled for a 2025 release. The fight resolves when the armor plating on Jaime's Blue Beetle armor cracks wide enough to show his face. Guy refuses to listen to his green ring's spidey sense and kill a child, opting instead to fly off. In the second earlier point in time, Jaime and his friends Paco and Brenda, while walking to school, accidentally uncovers a partially buried scarab. Jaime pockets the scarab and later, after stepping on the scarab, bonds with it. Just as a cultural subnote here, in Spain, the nickname Paco is commonly used for the name Francisco and has been popularly used since the 1980s. It's worth noting in urban slang, apparently, it can also refer to a racist term to refer to people from Spanish-speaking countries other than Spain, and has also been used as a nickname for an inexpensive hard drug made from freebase cocaine. Obviously, my intent today is to use it for its original, non-offensive, name-related purpose, as it was originally intended to be used in the comic. On the way to school the next day, while recounting Jamie's weird dreams caused by the scarab, a woman with no eyes who speaks strangely mysteriously talks at Jaime and his friends before disappearing. We'll later find out her name is Probe. We're also introduced to Milagro, Jaime's sister, and his parents, getting a sense of his upbringing in the world prior to superhero shenanigans. Note, Brenda calls Paco pendejo, which is slang in Mexico for calling somebody stupid. Well, that's the polite way of translating it anyway. Issue 2 is still structured to bounce between 2 points in time. In the past, at school, Jaime is the only one in his group that can see Probe and Damper thanks to Damper's mojo field. Probe is hurting, trying to probe Jaime thanks to the other presence she detects. Later at the garage, after Jaime offers to help out at the garage, turned down by his dad who wants Jaime to focus on his schooling, Jaime is attacked by Damper and Co., a group called Posse who wants revenge for Probe being hurt. Jaime's Blue Beetle armor triggers for the first time after one of the Posse, called Bonita, tries messing with his hormones, and he can detect she's pregnant. He escapes home and crashes into bed without his parents noticing. In the second point in time, Jamie walks through the desert, recounting what he's up to during Infinite Crisis while involved helping Superman. After being held at shotgun point by the gas station worker helps him get clothes from the Goodwill bin and drives him into town. Jaime tries to replicate the process of sneaking in quietly, but his sister Milagro has moved into his room. He finds out he hasn't been missing for a day like he thought, but for a whole year! So, following the events of the Infinite Crisis storyline, a 1 year later event commenced, a 2006 comic book storyline running through the books published by DC Comics, involving a narrative jump exactly 1 year into the future of the DC universe to explore major changes within the DC comic continuity. The issue ends with his parents running into his room after hearing Milagro's cries. Jaime's dad has noticeably lost a lot of weight, and though partially obscured by speech bubbles, is very obviously using walking aids. Note, habla muy bien, excuse my terrible language there, is Spanish for speaks very well. Very ironic in this case. Issue 3. This issue commences with Jaime transforming into the Blue Beetle armor to convince his family that his stories about why he's missing are true. His sister runs away scared, but his mum accuses him of not being the real Jaime. Jaime has a heart-to-heart with his dad, and Jaime has some solo time on a building talking to the scarab and exploring his abilities. He tracks down Paco, who seems to be working with the Posse, who are causing trouble with Homeland Security that Jaime intervenes in breaking up. And during the past year, Brenda, after a domestic violence incident that hospitalizes her, moves in with her aunt after her abuser dies in a DUI accident a week later. Her aunt is kept in the shadows and called La Dama, which I believe is Spanish for queen or lady. Issue 4 starts with Jaime researching the previous Blue Beetles. Oracle hacks his computer to speak to Jaime, but Jaime buffs her attempts to recruit him. To clarify, Oracle is Barbara Gordon, formerly the second and most iconic Batgirl. First is Betty Kane, third is Cassandra Cain, fourth is Stephanie Brown. Barbara Gordon is usually the daughter of Police Commissioner James Gordon. The Joker, in an infamous story called The Killing Joke, decides to go after Commissioner Gordon's family, shooting Barbara Gordon point blank through the spinal cord. Her vigilante career as Batgirl over, Barbara honed her computer and hacking skills, taking on a new mantle as the mysterious Oracle, providing intel to the wider super community and taking down crime. Oracle also led her own team of operatives called the Birds of Prey, established in 1996, who are a rotating roster of mostly female superheroes, though Black Canary and Huntress are considered the most iconic, regularly recurring members alongside Barbara Gordon. Later universe reboots and crises would see Barbara Gordon recover the use of her legs much sooner than the pre-2011 DC Comic universe, but Barbara would frequently be a contributing member in later iterations, either as Batgirl or using her Oracle tech skills. The Birds of Prey have been depicted in media a couple of times, loosely adapted in the 2020 Harley Quinn movie without Barbara Gordon. The Birds of Prey comic was also loosely adapted in a short-lived 2002 series featuring a comic-accurate Barbara Gordon, who underwent the Killing Joke's fateful shooting and had taken up the Oracle mantle, a non-comic accurate The Huntress, who in the show is the meta-human daughter of Batman and Catwoman, and a descendant of Black Canary called Dinah with telepathic abilities instead of the iconic Scream. The TV series would be one of the world's revisited in a brief scene during the CW Arrowverse crossover event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, with the Huntress sleeping over rooftops in her iconic outfit while the world is collapsing around her, with an uncredited cameo by the actress who played Oracle talking in her ear. I believe Dana Meyer might have been the actress's name. Additionally, iconic Birds of Prey comic writer Gail Simone scripted the Justice League Unlimited animated TV episode Double Date with the intention of featuring a temporarily housebound Barbara Gordon / Batgirl contacting the Huntress and Black Canary to complete a case for her. However, a character's rights issue necessitated Gordon's removal, and Huntress and Black Canary instead working separately with the Question and Green Arrow, respectively. The Birds of Prey also appeared in an episode of Batman, The Brave and the Bold, replacing Barbara Gordon with Catwoman in the lineup. Anyway, back to the comic. Or actually before that, if you wanted to learn more about Barbara Gordon, her time as Batgirl or Oracle, please make sure to check out the Comic Club from 2024 in September, where we covered Batgirls, the 2023 comic book. Anyway, back to the current comic from 2006. Jaime's mum takes him to the doctor for a checkup, but the tests come back clear. Brenda and Paco fill Jaime in that his dad was shot because of Lewis, his deadbeat employee's actions. Brenda's aunt sends a lackey called the Diviner to track down the new Blue Beetle, and he susses out that Jaime is possibly the Blue Beetle, though it's never really made clear what his thought process was to reach that point. The lackey summons malicious Ents so that he can attack Jaime without an attack near Brenda being linked back to him. After the Scarab being hesitant to help, as it doesn't want to hurt the Ents, which are linked to nature, Jaime takes control of the Blue Beetle armor and disposes of the Ents. His suspicions confirmed, Brenda's aunt's lackey disappears. Jaime is adamant that they not be spoon-fed answers by Oracle or other superheroes, but instead investigates on their own. Note, I think the kid says he's traveling back to 1973 and was a cop, in a reference to the 2006 series Life of Mars about a Manchester police officer from 2006 played by John Sim, aka the Master on Doctor Who mysteriously finds himself working as a police officer in 1970s Manchester. Issue 5, Blue Beetle. As Jaime Reyes waits for Paco to arrive to get him to the posse, a man asks Jaime to stop probing him. The man explains he was talking to Jaime Scarab, and that he is simply a stranger. The man quickly loses interest after the stranger discovers that Jaime isn't the one he was looking for. As Paco and Damper arrive at the scene, Jaime discovers the man was hidden in an invisible spectrum, and the others are unable to hear the Scarab speaking. Hidden in Damper's invisible dampening field, Jaime and the others now cross the border to the posse hideout. This stranger is called the Phantom Stranger, whose abilities include immortality and magical abilities, including dimensional travel, energy bolts, sees spiritual entities, casts illusions, transmutation, gets omens and dreams, can survive in outer space, and can teleport. The Phantom Stranger is a mysterious figure in the history of the world. His origins, nature, even his name, have never been revealed. It's rumored the Phantom Stranger is likely based on the Mysterious Stranger, an unfinished novella written by Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, between 1897 and 1908. As with some versions of DC's Phantom Stranger, Twain Stranger is implied to be an exiled angel, possibly Satan himself. Nearby at a restaurant, Tia Amparo has a talk with her niece Brenda, worried about her friendship with Jaime. Knowing that his target is alone, the Diviner calls in the aid of the Bottom Feeder, a big hunchbacked man, to rescue a baby girl from the posse hideout and bring it to Warehouse 13 unharmed. With the location imprinted into his mind by the Diviner, the Bottom Feeder eagerly starts his holy mission. At the hideout, Jaime is introduced to two more members of the posse, but learns that Probe was taken away by the Crime Lord La Dama last year after the Scarab put her into the hospital. Then Benita accuses Jaime of taking her kid and attacks him, but as Jaime was with the posse all this time, it is quickly dismissed. Suddenly learning he can track people by DNA and by mixing their parents' DNA string, he is able to track Baby. As the Blue Beetle, Jaime discovers that the Bottom Feeder is a lunatic and attempts to kill Baby Alina for being the child of a witch, and sees the Blue Beetle as an angel sent down to kill him and escort him to heaven. The heavily tattooed man takes off with the child, saving the child from the Blue Monster. No longer holding a baby, Jaime can fight the Bottom Feeder undistracted. After a short fight, Jaime has to stop his Scarab as it almost kills his opponent by feeding on its life energy. The Bottom Feeder falls into the river only to discover that this fight was filmed by the local news and now everyone knows the existence of the third Blue Beetle. Dun dun dun! Blue Beetle 2006, Issue 6. Outside of El Paso, the heavily tattooed man tracks the Blue Beetle, discovering a fried sensor and Jeep tracks. He smiles, knowing there is at least one person in Jaime's group who thinks it through. He follows them into private property. Jaime and the posse are about to spring Probe out of La Dama's prison called Warehouse 13 and decide to leave Paco behind. Jaime believes his friend is safer there, as Jaime himself is just adjusting to his Scarab body. Before they leave, Paco asks Damper to come back with his friend. Damper tells him he shouldn't worry, Jaime is the Blue Beetle after all. As he sees his friends leave, Paco mumbles how the last Beetle was shot in the head, alone. Inside, the posse are in for a surprise. They expected a prison, but instead find a heavily guarded resort. Even worse, the equipment can see Damper's cloaking field, and the group is discovered and surrounded. Things go sideways, including two of the posse swapping powers, resulting in Jaime powering up his Scarab armor and battling the headmaster. Outside, Paco is discovered by the guards, but gets unexpected help from the heavily tattooed man, whose identity is revealed in Issue 7. If you look at the partially obscured tattoos on the left arm in black ink, you'll get a hint. Clearest shot is visible in Issue 3. Blue Beetle has trouble with besting the headmaster until he refreshes his power by borrowing some energy from the guards around him. To separate the headmaster from his power source, Jaime grabs his opponent and flies out of the compound. The compound was covered in an occult shield that prevented magical people finding it. The headmaster being outside the field of the shield leads the Phantom Stranger straight to their location. Back in the compound, Jaime discovers La Dama, who he discovers is Tia Amparo, Brenda's aunt. The posse managed to convince half of the inhabitants of Warehouse 13 to return to the outside, as there is a local superhero now to protect them. The Blue Beetle, the other half including Probe herself, decide to stay, preferring their current life over being looked at as different. La Dama has no choice in letting them go. The Phantom Stranger allows her to keep hiding the ones that wish to stay, and eventually will become La Dama's personal army. Jaime and La Dama make a deal. He will not out La Dama to Brenda, and she will not out him as the Blue Beetle to the public. La Dama reminds him he better keep on her good side if he wants to learn more about his Scarab, as she controls any magical facility in a 1,000-mile radius. Suddenly, the heavily tattooed man on a bike, following Paco, drops in unannounced, and the big man reveals that Jaime should pass on the La Dama's magic offer, revealing to Jaime that the Scarab is actually of extraterrestrial origin. Dun dun dun!